Hey everybody, Max Aita here with Juggernaut Training Systems, coming to you today to talk about SuperTotal Training and some of the considerations if you are a powerlifter learning weightlifting, or if you previously were a powerlifter and now you're kind of touching up on weightlifting, and how to best incorporate both of them in a SuperTotal program for you. So the first thing we want to do with SuperTotal programming, if you're coming from powerlifting, is consider, there's going to be one main focus for the whole training cycle. We don't want to go into a SuperTotal program thinking that we're going to, max out all 5 lifts every single session, every single week, and everything's going to come up all at once. There's going to be a give and take. So the first thing I do as a experienced powerlifter is decide what is that one thing, like what's the number one priority, the thing that I really have to work on most. For some of you, it's going to be maybe just the technique of the snatch. That's pretty new to you. You got to focus on that. That should be the focus for the majority of the training cycle. Perhaps it's the jerk, or perhaps it's mobility limitations. So kind of assess what that number one thing is for you, and use that as the overall guiding principle or guiding light for the program, for the training cycle. Once you know what that is, prioritize how you're going to approach solving that problem. Think about what it is that you need to do in the program to actually accomplish that. If, for example, it's developing the technique of the lifts, then that drill work and those kind of things are going to be the most important stuff for you. If it's mobility, then that should be a larger part of the program. If your skill in the lifts is totally novice, you've never done them before, then obviously you got to find a progression and use those progressions to develop the actual beginnings of the skill. I like to look at the overall approach, my overall approach to how to eliminate technical weaknesses, or really just how to evaluate what's my priority, what should I be focusing on. I have a 3-prong approach. There's going to be one of these 3 things that is most wrong, or is the biggest area for you to work on. The first is that your technical issue or your limitation is conceptual. You don't understand what you're doing wrong, or you don't understand how to do the technique correctly. That could come from not knowing what the right position to be in the snatch is, not knowing what the start position, not knowing how to make contact with the bar, not knowing how to hold the bar overhead, etc. That's simple. It's just a matter of learning what that is. We use drills and cues to sort of alleviate those things and correct them. The second is that you might know what you're doing right, meaning that you understand how to do a snatch, you understand what positions you're supposed to be in, but when it gets to a certain intensity, there's an inability to hold the position. Let's say in the snatch, you can't stay over the bar properly when the bar gets to your kneecap. And it doesn't matter, that you know what you're doing right, there's a physical weakness. So that would be like a GPP issue, meaning that you're lacking some physical quality that's kind of stopping you from doing the lift correctly. That's remedied with, basic general training. If your back is weak, we do some RDLs, or we do some extra back work. If your overhead position is, too immobile, or you can't hold the bar in the right spot, then we would use some general training like mobility stuff, flexibility exercises to kind of fix that. And then the third problem you can possibly have, you might know how to do the lift properly, you might be strong enough to do it properly, but you have a lack of exposure to the right exercises. So that would be like an SPP problem. A lack of exposure to the right exercises might look like something where you understand how to do the lift, you've practiced it, you've done some of them before, maybe you're pretty decent at it, but you have maybe one glaring issue, and it's not a strength issue. You might have, maybe a problem staying over the bar properly, or transitioning around your knees properly in the snatch. You've got a strong back, you've got a very strong back, you understand how to do it, but you don't have a lot of exposure to exercises that are forcing you to do it right. So in that case, you might do a lot more special exercises like a hang snatch from below the knee, or a snatch with a pause at your knee as a means to, one, overload that position and teach you to do it right, but also as a way to give you exposure to an exercise that is, targeting one specific area of that lift. So kind of understanding there's going to be, one or two or a combination of these, factors that make up your technical weaknesses or your shortcomings. We would then design the program around those aspects, right? So we decide, hey, it's mostly conceptual. I just don't really know how to do weightlifting. So, most of your program should be comprised of drill work and practicing positions. Maybe you're pretty decent there, but you lack some specific, issue where you haven't done any kind of power snatches or any kind of snatches, from the blocks that would help you. You're going to add in more SPP. And then, third, if you've got good exposure, you've done some snatch and clean and jerk before, you've got good technique or decent technique, but you have limitations that are physical, you haven't done a lot of overhead strengthening exercises, then you'd incorporate that in the general sense. So, we also have to remember when we're designing a program, going from powerlifting to weightlifting, that some things have to take a back seat. If our main thing going from being a powerlifter to being a weightlifter, if we're going to do that, we have to make sure that we are okay with the idea that while we're learning snatch and clean and jerk and we're spending a lot of time on drills or mobility work, some of that energy has to be coming from somewhere, and we're going to take it from the things that we're best at. So, as a powerlifter, what do we know about you? You're already probably pretty strong or have a lot of general strength relative to your weightlifting skill. So, that stuff's going to have to go or should go on a maintenance amount of volume. We don't want to be trying to improve our squat, bench, and deadlift at maximum pace and also learn how to snatch and clean and jerk at the same time. Doesn't mean that you can't get better at all things at the same time, right? If you've never done a snatch or clean and jerk, that number is probably going to come up really quick, and your squat and bench and deadlift may also come up a little bit during that training cycle. But we have to be okay with the idea that that may not happen. So we're going to put the strength exercises kind of on the back burner. They don't need as much training volume. The next is, you may need extra mobility work, right? If you've got a really strong bench press or if you've done a lot of bench pressing and you have mobility restrictions because of that, that's something where, you're probably going to have to back off quite a bit on the bench pressing so that you're not, fighting yourself to gain the mobility you need for the overhead lifts. Technique work is going to take up a huge portion, depending on how much you need, but it's going to take up a huge portion of your training time. Not necessarily total volume, but the amount of time you spend in the gym, or if your workout's an hour and a half or 2 hours long, a bigger portion of that should be devoted to the technique portion. And it should always be the first thing you're doing. If you're going to come in the gym and you've got snatch work planned and squatting, and you have to learn to snatch, if that workout's normally 2 hours, you probably allot, at least an hour of that, if not more, to, dedicated drills, mobility work, practicing progressions, and then doing some overload training for the snatch so that you can maximize the progress you're making there. And then we also want to avoid situations that are kind of like we talked about before, but like the tug of war battle where it's like, maybe you're learning the snatch pretty well, but at the same time, you're also not giving in and letting go of some of those things that bother, that maybe contradict learning the snatch. And that can be things like low bar squatting, right? If you do a lot of low bar squatting and it beats up your elbows, probably not going to feel good to do a lot of snatches as well at the same time. And same things, like if you're doing a lot of conventional deadlifts where your start position is very different than your clean, continuing to hammer on those conventional deadlifts may be something that negatively impacts the speed that you learn the clean and the start position. So let's remember we have to take those things into consideration, that there's stuff that's going to be a give and take. We don't want to end up getting into a situation where we're trying to do all things at once and it really gets us nowhere. And then one more thing that we want to remember for a powerlifter who's learning weightlifting or coming into SuperTotal with little weightlifting experience, we want to focus on one of the lifts at a time. In my experience, it's been better to have lifters spend their whole day focusing on snatch only rather than doing like snatches and clean and jerks all in the same day, simply because if you're learning a new movement and you are adding in other things that are similar but different, they can mess with some of your technique, mess with some of your timing and tempo. The clean and the snatch are very different, even though they seem pretty similar on the surface. So doing just a snatch focused day, just a jerk focused day, maybe a snatch focused day again, or another jerk focused day, or a clean focused day, then you're giving yourself the best chance to really dial in your technique for that one session. And then on top of that, what we do is we would combine, that maintenance volume of the power lifts with that. We can look at a quick example here of a sample program, and I'll just kind of go through it. This is a 5-day program designed around somebody who came from powerlifting or a more extensive powerlifting background and going into a weightlifting background. So we can look at day one. And actually, if we look at all the days, we see a similar structure here where, day one is a snatch-focused day. So the first exercise after a general warm-up is going to be like a tall snatch plus overhead squat. That's a drill, right? We're focusing that initial, training time on the drill work there. Then we would move into a snatch or a snatch progression depending on your skill level. That could be like a hang snatch. It could be snatch in the power position. It could be more complex progression if you're more advanced. And then we would finally move into our back squat. We would try to keep our strength exercises and the power lifts more focused on emphasizing the Olympic lifting aspect. So we're not going to do like low bar squatting if you already come from powerlifting and have a lot of experience with it, because it's not going to be super beneficial for weightlifters or learning to lift. So they'd have a high bar squat there. We look at the next day, day two, same kind of structure. We've got drills, a stepping jerk balance. These are done with probably an empty barbell. Then we would go into our jerk or jerk progression exercises. And that could be a regression, if the split jerk is still something you're learning, it could be a push press or a power jerk, or even, as regressed as a press if you still need to learn how to hold the bar overhead or have mobility restrictions. Then we would finally move into, our maintenance work for bench press, and then some bodybuilding, some accessory work after that, but not a ton, and only things that we know aren't going to negatively impact the Olympic lifting practice. Day three, we can see that this is a clean focus day. So more drill work, tall clean plus front squat. This is stuff. This is a time for us to work on front rack mobility, which is probably going to be something that's critical for a powerlifter coming in, especially if they had a big bench press. And then we'd go into our clean or clean progressions. Again, that's similar to snatch. It could be a full classic clean. It could be progression if you're still learning. It could be from the power position or from the hang. Then we would move into our deadlifts. And this is where, if you were training for a powerlifting meet or you're a powerlifter training seriously, you'd probably be doing conventional deadlifts or sumo deadlifts here. In this case, this program needs to be designed for someone who's learning the lifts still. So our progression here is going to be a clean deadlift. We're focused mostly on practicing those positions. You'll also notice that the RPE range here is a little bit lighter. It's focused more on technique. There's not a lot of reps per set. It's designed as a way to, one, maintain skill in the deadlift, but also develop some skill towards the actual clean. And then again, some extra supplementary lifts after that, belt squats and rows. Those things can be incorporated based on an individual need. We see a little bit different structure here where, this is a day where we would be developing a little bit more skill and a little bit more focus on executing the lifts better. And this would be a method, doing 10 singles here with, around 70% range intensity. It's going to work if somebody has a little more experience. If they're just learning, this could just be another progression day like the first day of the week. But this is a great method to teach people how to learn the lifts. It keeps them focused on making lifts and focused only on the next rep rather than overthinking or not really getting into a groove. If you're doing sets of 2 or 3 reps, you can do 1 or 2 good, then 1 poorly, and then you're feeling like you're not really progressing. I really like these timed singles. They're a great way to get good focus on the lifts, good technical practice. And as you go, and you progress through the weeks, these can get heavier and heavier as you go. Finally, the second squat workout here on this is going to be a front squat. And that's, again, we have to remember that we're doing a lot more stuff that should be focused. All our strength stuff should be focused on the actual Olympic lifting variants and the things that are going to help that. So we'd have more front squatting here, not as much back squatting. And again, the overall week doesn't have a ton of squatting or a ton of deadlifting or bench pressing because we're still focused primarily on weightlifting. Day 5 is going to be the same structure as day 4. We've got clean and jerks for our singles. Again, if you're still not at that point where full clean and jerks are doable, that can be a progression just like the other days in the week. And we would do that for the same reason we did the snatch singles. It gives you a chance to really progress and develop the skill and focus and just have that focus dialed in on one lift at a time. Then we'd have some more bench pressing. This is a day where, if you had a really big bench press or your bench pressing was inhibiting your overhead strength, that could be changed from a bench press to something like an overhead squat or a standing press or something that, might focus more on that. If you don't have those limitations, you're flexible, you don't have any restrictions, then, more benching could still be included there. To kind of recap here, how we would design a SuperTotal program for someone who's coming from powerlifting. The key points are, develop technique first, prioritize the low-hanging fruit. If it's a mental issue, you don't know how to do it, attack it that way. If you know how to do the lift, but you don't have the right strength or you're lacking strength, you have a weakness somewhere, attack it that way. If you've got pretty decent skill, you are strong, but you're just not exposed to the lift enough, then that's the route we take. Use drills and positional work to ease into the technique. You're gonna be strong. If you're coming from powerlifting, the weights are probably super light. Focus on drills. Focus on the quality of execution of drills and of technical work before you focus on loading the lifts at all. You do not want to try and put the cart before the horse and put lots of weight on there and develop really rugged technique because of that. And then manage the volume because of the added weightlifting and the impact everything's going to have on you. If you were doing, lots of squatting and deadlifting and bench pressing at near, MRV levels where every week was all your energy going into those things, and now you've added weightlifting, you have to pull back on some of that volume and understand that, one, if you're always fatigued or you're really tired from all that, training from the power lifts, it's going to be hard to learn the skill of the Olympic lifts. And two, if you're anywhere beyond the total beginner, you're going to be using some weight on the snatch and clean jerk exercises, so that's going to have an impact on the amount of volume you should be doing in the power lift. So dial those things back, understand there's an interplay between them. And then finally, just keep your focus on what's important. What is the overall goal for the training cycle? If you came into it and your bench, squat, and deadlift are super strong, and you can clean a lot, and you've snatched decently, but you've never done a jerk, then jerk should probably be the number one priority, learning that skill and building it up. And understand that, give yourself focus for that, understand the rest of that stuff. It can all be on the back burner at maintenance levels just to allow you to get that skill you need. All right, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this video, check out the rest of our offerings on Juggernaut's YouTube page.